Hi, welcome back to Deep Images. We are continuing our incredible series on demons, devils, and black magic for Halloween 2024. Today it's CF Roberts and myself, my wonderful co-host here, and we are going to tackle a few, span a couple episodes here. And I want to start out with one here, but first I want to ask everybody to like and subscribe because the algorithms are really suck at keeping people informed of when our videos are up. So ring the hit the notification bell if that helps. Um, we're close to reaching 500. I mean, we're like right about there, and then we've got to we've got to sprint toward 1,000. That's our goal. So please help us out if you can. Um, so the first one I want to talk about today is called Incubus from 1966. This is directed by Leslie Stevens, who was one of the prime architects of the Outer Limits television show, the original. I think that show's been remade once, unlike the Twilight Zone, which has been remade
Yeah,
4 times. But
yeah.
I loved the Outer Limits. So Leslie Stevens, when the Outer Limits folded in '65, he still had some other ideas, and he kind of wanted to get into. He wanted to do an art house fantasy movie, and he employed a young cinematographer, Conrad Hall, who years later went on to win 3 Oscars for cinematography. Um, the first one I found out was Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Um,
Wow.
the second one was American Beauty, which I didn't know that until or remember until this week. And the third was Road to Perdition, which Justin Cotton actually covered on this channel recently under the crime series.
Yeah.
Um, so they're not actually the movies that come to mind of mine when I think of his best cinematography, but I guess to, the average populace, it's kind of like Morricone. His Oscar-winning and acclaimed stuff by the mainstream is, to me, his weakest compositions. So, I guess to each their own. But anyway, Conrad Hall jumped on board this, and they decided to film it in black and white. It was heavily influenced by Ingmar Bergman. People nowadays would probably call this folk horror. Um, I'm surprised it hasn't actually been tagged that more aggressively, but maybe that time is coming.
Yeah.
Because
Tagged or co-opted or whatever.
yeah, because obviously, The Witch is considered a big
The Vivitch?
the Vitch, yeah. That film I definitely think helped jumpstart the renewed interest in folk horror.
Yeah.
Um so I think people would like Incubus if they saw it who are into that stuff. It has a weird checkered history. I'll try to get into it a little bit and also get into like what the movie's about.
Yeah.
Um, I think what it's most well known for are a couple of things. Not that Leslie Stevens did it, unfortunately, but it's more well known for starring William Shatner, and it was wrapped just a few months before he began as Captain Kirk on Star Trek. So he was kind of a, mildly known supporting actor he had an interesting background, more of which I actually learned researching Incubus again than I even remembered from Star Trek reading. In that he grew up in Montreal and he actually English was either his second language or it was taught concurrently with French since it was Montreal. I've never heard him speak French, but apparently he's fluent. He was fluent in it. I don't know if he still is. But of course, he also knew Yiddish growing up. So he was a he was a Jewish, an English-speaking Jewish man of English stock who grew up around French Canadians and knew French in Canada. So, he'd been in several movies, The Intruder by Corman and Brothers Karamazov and various things like that. And so Incubus, I think would have been a big role for him in a way. I mean, The Intruder was a big role, but it only got a certain. It didn't have a lot of traction in this day for Roger Corman. Of course, in that one he plays a virulent racist. Have you seen that one, Chuck?
Which one?
The Intruder by Roger Corman with Shatner.
No.
So Shatner is a virulent racist who comes to this town and tries to sway people against the minorities. And at first, and it's kind of like a Lonesome Roads kind of story in the sense that
Uh,
he's not in the media, but he does kind of sway people at first, and then he falls because he's a hypocrite. And but yeah, he's pretty nasty in that. So just a handful of years later, I think Intruder was maybe 64, 63, 64. So towards the end of 65, they started working on this film, and Shatner is the star, and the whole movie is shot in Esperanto. That's another thing it's well known or
okay.
infamous for. Uh, Apparently, fluent Esperanto speakers think it's a joke. They deride it, they mock it, they make jokes about it. Again, this isn't stuff I knew until I researched a little deeper. Um, and The movie didn't do well. It is Ingmar Bergman-ish, so let me tell you how it ties in with our theme, and then I'll get more back into the history of it. So, Shatner plays a soldier named Mark. He's coming to this town, and I want to make sure I say this right because I always forget this plot element, even though I've seen the movie quite a number of times now. The Esperanto title is Incubo. Um, and for those who don't know, Esperanto is a constructed language, and it was supposed to be like a become a universal language because it had elements of all the different Romance languages. That didn't happen, but in the counterculture era, it gained a little traction. I first encountered Esperanto because of the Philip Jose Farmer novel "To Your Scattered Bodies Go," which was written in the late '60s, in which everyone ever lived and died is resurrected on a vast river world, and that's the series. And in order to get everybody to a level playing ground, someone introduces Esperanto, and eventually that travels the length of the river so that there's a common language and there's not a Tower of Babel like thing going on. And one of the people who is one of the great promulgators of Esperanto, who is kind of like a minister like figure in the river world afterworld, is Hermann Goering, who has completely repented from Nazism. Uh, so in his second chance at life, but that's where I first heard of Esperanto. This is like around 1981, and I don't really know any Esperanto, but they employ it in this movie, and actually Leslie Stevens, who wrote the movie as well as directed it, he forbade anyone from in his contract. He forbade anyone from ever dubbing it into another language, um, because he decided that he dug Esperanto, and he thought it gave it a quote unquote otherworldly feel to it. He wanted this kind of eeriness that I guess he had already achieved in Outer Limits, and of course Sterling had achieved in Twilight Zone, and he wanted to do that in a movie. And obviously, visually, this movie is, like I said, it's heavily indebted to Ingmar Bergman. And is a forerunner of black and white folk horror. Uh, you could even see it in the lineage of Marquita Lazarova, which I think is it's not a folk horror movie, but it has a look that's been widely influential on folk horror. Now, don't get me wrong, Conrad Hall's a great cinematographer, but the Incubus does not touch Marquita Lazarova. Marquita Lazarova is one of the most breathtakingly beautiful films I think that's ever been shot in history of cinema. Um, but it's in that kind of lineage, is what I'm getting at. A modern folk horror one that I like that's in that lineage that wasn't as well known as The Witch, but came out in the wake of it was November, which is an Estonian film. And actually, they're doing the folk horror book two, volume two of the box set that Kier Janice did. So they're doing another one, 24 more movies. And November actually is going to be in that set, but I have it
Oh,
separately
cool.
on Blu-ray. I reviewed November on this channel before Deep Images existed, but that was a long time ago. Um, but Incubus kind of fits snugly into that, and I guess I'm going on about it because I'm just now realizing that. I mean, I kind of knew that, but I didn't really think about it. But when I thought about November, and I looked at the look of that movie, and I looked at Marquita Lazarova, and I looked at The Witch, I thought of these movies, and I noticed how much they reminded me of The Seventh Seal, and my favorite of the Bergman I've seen, which is only about 10 movies. The Virgin Spring is my favorite one. Um,
I could see that.
you have or haven't?
Oh, I've seen the movie. What I'm saying is, I could see that relation.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah, because it is kind of like a medieval little village of people, and it does have horror elements because obviously it was remade as Last House on the Left. Um, but as far as Incubus, its story is kind of in this fictional town called a village called Nomen Tuum, which apparently is Latin for your name. And there's this magic well that can heal the sick or restore someone's youth or beauty, and it draws people to the village, especially people who are kind of corrupt and greedy and superficial, and a lot of them meet their end there because hovering about the village are this small race of succubi, and um, the kind of main succubi, as far as who seems to be on the hierarchy, is named a male, and she has a younger sister, and it's not clear whether she's her genetic sister or just her sister, as in sisterhood of succubi. I've read accounts that claim both, alternately either or both. Um, and this younger person is named Kia. So Kia is played by let me make sure I think it's Allison Ames, who was married to Leslie Stevens at the time. Eloise Hart plays a male. I mean, I'm also mentioning these people because another aspect of this film is it has a reputation as a cursed movie. And I
Wow.
think compared to a lot of cursed movies, it hasn't been that widely reported, at least to where I encountered it, because I thought I'd kind of heard of the majority of them. I didn't know it was considered a cursed movie until, again, I didn't know that until this week. Um,
Wow.
my experience is basically knowing the history of the movie as far as how it was conceived and how it was lost for many years and then restored in this millennium. Um, so back to the story. So Kia and Emil, they're hunting for these men who they lure, sexually, who are there for the purifying water of this well. And they murder them, they reap their souls for the Lord of Darkness or for hell. They never use the word Satan, but so obviously succubi are demons. So we're right here with demons and devils in this one. So and this is not to be confused with the 1980s movie called Incubus with John Cassavetes, which was kind of I guess, a B horror of its time. Um, Nor to be confused with Jess Franco's Succubus or Necronomicon, which came out 2 years after this movie, Incubus. Um, but these succubi, they prey on these men. So Kia decides it's not a challenge anymore. Um, everybody's corrupt. She tries to hit the pious in the churches, and learns that they're as full of iniquity and sin as the other common dudes that come through the town. And so into town comes this cat named Mark, Marc. That's all we know him as, and or Marco as they pronounce it in Esperanto.
Yeah.
Um, Mark is played by William Shatner. So he's a soldier. We don't know what conflict he's been in. The time frame of this movie, you know, all of the succubi and a lot of the villagers dress in kind of period where they look like they could walk out of a Bergman or medieval movie. But Mark and his sister Arndis, they dress fairly contemporary for the 60s. I mean, nothing, super counterculture or anything, but I mean, he has like a turtleneck sweater and I guess all males did back in the 60s and 70s. But he's got his arm in a sling. He's been wounded in some kind of unnamed war. And he comes into this town and he wants to see if this water will help him heal. And his sister and he are very tight. And she is played by a young woman called Anne Atmar. So those are all but one of your major characters. There's very few. It's a finite amount. So it keeps the story
Yeah.
pretty simple. This is only like a 78-minute movie, I think. So um Kia decides Mark is a challenge because he actually is virtuous. They strongly imply that he's still a virgin. At the very least, he is a Christian and of some persuasion. Um, they leave a lot of these things kind of vague, but enough to let you know. I mean, and I think that makes the story more universal. It makes it more. It's not dated. I think it has a certain quality, just like Bergman stuff. I think that kind of transcends its period it was made in and its period it's supposed to be set in. And I like that kind of storytelling. Um, so she tries to seduce Mark, and Mark does fall in love with her. He does want her, but he tells her, I can't mate with you unless we're married. My word, mate. And she's kind of annoyed about this, but so he takes her to a church and she freaks out. And some really innovative camera work as she's running out of the church, because you see her running at a distance and the camera turns all the way upside down and you're still seeing her running away. Uh, and simple kind of shot, but I thought it was really well done. Um, and so she goes to unmail her sister, and unmail feels as though Kia's like kind of messed up in the head now, because it's obviously she has feelings for Mark, but the experience in the church and with Mark professing his virginal love for her is kind of it's repulsed her just the way her true nature you think would repulse Mark if he knew it. So it's an interesting kind of quandary. Um, so it gets into that whole holiness, God versus the devil, it's classic themes, and or once classic themes, at least in a more predominantly Christian era.
Hmm.
Um, or you have a movie like The Exorcist, where the protagonist is secular, an atheist, a lapsed Catholic, and then you have that whole conflict with how's she going to deal with the devil unless she turns to a priest, which she doesn't really believe in.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and basically, they feel like he is like kind of wrecked as a succubus, and so Amael performs this ritual. Now, around this time, there's an eclipse. This is only a small plot point, and it's visually nice, but it's not like drawn out. But what it does is it blinds Mark's sister Arndis, so he has to like take care of her, and so he's obviously torn. He's falling in love with this woman. She runs from him, and then he's got to take care of his sister. And then doesn't seem like the well did a whole lot for him. His arm's still a little fucked up. Um, so a male, Kia's sister summons the titular incubus, which is the flip of a succubus. So an incubus, is a demon who would prey on women sexually in their sleep. I mean, there's been obviously the movie Incubus that I mentioned, but also The Entity with Barbara Hershey was a movie kind of like that in the late 70s, I think. Um, so this Incubus is kind of portrayed definitely lascivious and definitely demonic. He's kind of a Pan-like figure almost. Um, and he's played by an actor named Miloš. Who was born Milošević. And this guy was pretty young when he did this movie. I think he was like 24. And in real life, he was having an affair with a woman named Carolyn Mitchell, who actually uh, was an actress. Her real name was Barbara Ann Thomason Rooney. She was one of Mickey Rooney's many, many, many wives. Um, and I think even at that point in the 60s, uh, he was vastly older than her. And, as he got older, his wives kept getting younger as he became more Christian also, which was very bizarre. He was a frequent guest on the PTL club, which kind of cemented my hatred for him for life. He's done some good work, but I find him just a really odious kind of found him an odious person. I mean, I get why people liked him, but I like the fact he's short, solidarity there. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so he was married to this woman and they weren't happy. And so Milos was his wife's lover. He plays the incubus fittingly. And he rapes and kills Arndis, Mark's sister. And since this was intended as like an art house movie, even though it's like 1966, but it has, and this is a scene that was censored briefly, it was shown so rarely in America that it really wasn't an issue. But when it was shown, it was censored in America, but not in France. There is a scene where she's completely topless for a number of seconds, and it's above average graphicness for a '66 movie. Kind of like Seconds had those shots that were seen, in Canada and stuff, but weren't restored fully until years later. We covered that on the channel too, and Bill Mulligan talked about that. Um, so yeah, so Mark's he's attacked and he's mauled, and these cultists are going writhing crazy, and he invokes God and he invokes the cross, and he manages to keep the incubus and the cultists. It really are the succubi. They're all really succubi. Some of them might be human. It's a little vague, but they all kind of have these robes and everything, and hoods, and so he keeps them at bay, and he flees to the church, and Kia. He brings Kia into the church, and they think, well, he thinks the incubus is temporarily, like he can't enter the church, and so that's what he thinks, since he's been able to ward him off with a few Christian evocations. Surely the incubus can't come into the church. He even thinks the incubus might be destroyed, but the incubus returns, and this time it manifests as a giant black goat, and attacks both of them, especially mauling Kia. And Kia invokes God, even though it causes her pain, and she manages to repel the incubus. And famous shot from the movie. I think anybody who has read about the movie or seen the movie or seen anything about the movie know this very iconic shot. It was used in the original posters of them lying on the floor of the church, in between the pews, and Shatner's holding her, and they're both kind of wounded, and he's starting to crawl forward like really slowly. It's really dramatic, and it's not hammy. I think it's fantastic acting by Shatner, and I think he really is killer in this. And
Yeah.
many disagree, but woe be to them. But so yeah, so the incubus doubles back, and the ending is kind of ambiguous because we're left with an amazing image. It's a real goat that they used in these scenes, and they can only film it kind of in limited fashion, so it wouldn't like really maul them. But the goat rears up, and it's already a black and white film, and then it goes solarized, a negative image, and so it's incredibly satanic kind of last image that's burned into your brain. So is the incubus victorious? Is he about to just finish them off, or is he about to be cast away? But it seems like they're going to die anyway, but they're going to die, but they're together now, so
Mhm.
it's kind of sweet. But I enjoyed this movie a lot. I had never heard of it until 2001 when the DVD first came out. I was working at Borders Books and Music, and I was in charge of the DVD department. And I was like, "What the hell is this?" And so I have visual aids to prove this. This is the exact DVD I bought 23 years ago at Borders,
I,
and this is still not on Blu-ray because there's something wrong with the universe. But there is a good. I did find some good news about that though, which I'll get to later, um, if I remember. Uh, but anyway, this movie played in San Francisco in late '66, and the Esperanto speakers in the audience, apparently there were like 100 who were curious because it's the second film ever made in Esperanto. The other one was Entourage from 1964, which I know nothing about, and actually it's very hard to find out even what the plot of the movie is, apparently. It might be a lost movie. This one did play in France for a little bit longer, and so it did have French subtitles, and had a slight, you know, viewership there, but it quickly faded. And then it was considered lost for almost 35 years. Um,
wow.
so Leslie Stevens and the producer Anthony Taylor found out that there was a print at the Cinématique in Paris, I believe. It's in France. I think it was in Paris. And they decided, hey, maybe this is, you know, what we can restore it from and put it out on a home video. Because they tried to put it on home video in '93, and they just couldn't find the elements. Um, so yeah, according to this, a print was discovered in the permanent collection of the Cinémathèque Française in Paris. But the print was in poor condition. It had French subtitles burned on, and so they used this. Good thing it came out in 2000. They started working on this in 2000 with modern technology. So they did an optical frame by frame restoration. And I think it looks terrific. The only downside is since the French subtitles were burned on, they had to, in order to translate to English, they had to make English subtitles and use black bars to block out the French and then put the English over it. So
Yeah.
on this DVD, the only option is to watch it that way. Now, our producer Dwayne Cochran recently found a print through his many sources online, and it was an unmasked uh, print with French subtitles. And no, it was not the same. It may have been the same source print, but it's not the same as on this DVD. It did not have any English subtitles.
Uh,
Um, one of our associates, Chris Gilpin, was going to review this for the show at my behest because I was just had some others I wanted to do, but I wanted to make sure this was covered. Um, and so Chris couldn't review it at first because it didn't have English subtitles, and he was confused. Um, because unlike me, he doesn't know any French, and I don't know a lot. I mean, I can kind of follow it reading it, but it's not like my second language. It's maybe my I have two languages, English and French. English is my first, and French is like my 10th. That's how good I am at it. But I can
oui.
pronounce it flawlessly, having studied it in school as a kid. So
Je comprends un très petit peu.
je ne comprends pas, or je ne sais pas. That's what I always said to my French teacher
Yeah,
because
je
I
ne sais
never knew the
pas.
answer.
Uh,
Je ne sais pas. I got you covered. So that print was interesting. It looked pretty good. It looked about not quite as clear as the DVD, but then Chris did find a print on YouTube, which is the same exact print as the DVD. And obviously someone just ripped it off the DVD. And apparently it's been up there for quite a while. Unfortunately, Chris had to drop out of the show, so I kind of inherited the task of reviewing this one because I just think it's important and thematically and just as a movie, I've always wanted to. I don't think I've ever reviewed it on this channel. Even when I did a series on movies that still, for whatever reason, aren't on North American Blu-ray. I do not think I got around to Incubus. Maybe I did. I'd have to thumb through the archives, but I don't recall it. But it's definitely has been on my slate, and I'm afraid to part with this DVD because I don't know when it's going to come on Blu-ray. But I did learn today that in 2023, a new uh, wonderful print of it was located uh, by people who were associated with the restoration. I'm not sure if it was Anthony Taylor himself. I can't remember if he's still alive, the producer, but um, so I would say that that print is going to be the source of a Blu-ray in the next year or two. This hasn't been announced, but that's kind of the implication I got is that that's they've got an eye on that being the next upgrade finally. So this company that put this out was yeah, I can't read it in the dark. But the Sci-Fi Channel is who paid for the restoration. I'm assuming that's only because of Shatner, because I mean, in the year 2000, the Sci-Fi Channel did play some good material. Now, of course, within just a few years, uh, they became total trash, in my opinion. But
yeah.
they pretty much rode on the fact that Battlestar Galactica was a huge hit, and then they just kind of just gave up after that on even trying to do
Yeah, it's
anything.
like Sharknado forever.
Right. I mean, their stuff is just only tenuously even science fiction half the time. And then they also
Yeah.
decided that they were going to change the spelling of their name, which, SYFY, which I was fine with that. But then they got so pretentious as to say in spoken interviews that now you have to pronounce it Siffy, the Siffy channel. And I was like, you fucking, anyway, yeah, wanker. So But anyway, so they did one good thing though. They did pay for this movie to come out, and I bless them for that. Siffy, bless you, Siffy. And
Thank you, Siffy. Thank you for your service.
exactly.
Thank you
So
for playing.
I found it a wonderful movie, and I thought it was amazing. It was considered lost for so long, and that it was it wasn't in a lot of the it wasn't in any of the areas that I would have encountered it growing up, being into Star Trek and having like my godmother would buy me like a science fiction or fantasy film encyclopedia every birthday for like 5 or 6 years. She did that when I was a kid. And
Oh,
I never heard of this movie at all. So, and a couple of my friends who had been cineasts a little bit longer than me had claimed they heard of it. Oh yeah, I heard of that. You hadn't heard of that? And then I talked to them for 5 minutes, and they don't even know anything about it at all. Uh, but there were a lot of people like that in the town where I grew up back then. What we called posers. But so yes, I've seen it and I highly recommend it. I was going to ask Chuck what he thinks about this film and what his encounters with it might be.
I enjoyed it quite a lot. No, it was at some point early on in my and Heather's relationship where my friend Shannon. Now, Shannon's a real interesting character because she among many other things is kind of a crack linguistics fan, and she
Hmm.
was you know a big fan of Esperanto, and even now she studies many languages.
Oh well.
But she picked up on Incubus and got herself a copy, and we kind of made a big movie night between me and Heather and Shannon and her husband. We sat around and watched Incubus, and you know
Definitely
just
a date movie right there.
and the Shatner, and we were all about the Shatner,
Sure.
and so we watched that. And we enjoyed it quite a lot. I mean, I guess bones could be made about the fact that it puts itself in a niche right there because it's in Esperanto.
Right.
But the current mix, yeah, you can get the English subtitles, and it's quite easy to follow, I think. And yeah, it's a very entertaining movie.
Yeah, I think it's it's kind of simplistic from a moral point of view, but I think it's done well. I think it's like an archetype kind of thing, like I was saying, kind of
Yeah.
like I mean, I definitely think it falls under folk horror. I definitely feel it falls under satanic cinema, which I'm a big fan of, much to the
Mhm.
chagrin of many who hear me talking about it. But that's okay. We live in a secular world, okay? It's all right. Um, so I wanted to mention uh, before we close out the review, there are some fascinating other things I learned today. I want to follow up on the cursed movie angle.
Mm.
Um,
I'm anxious
this
to
is
hear about
very,
that.
very strange stuff. So, uh, this is from a website, the Horror Film Wiki. Many cast members met unfortunate fates after the film wrapped, giving rise to an urban legend that Incubus was a cursed production. Actor Milos killed his girlfriend, the estranged wife of Mickey Rooney, Barbara Ann Thomason Rooney, and himself in 1966, and he killed
Oh,
them with a gold-plated revolver that Mickey Rooney had purchased. Um,
ooh,
Actress Ann Atmar, who played Arndis, the ill-fated sister of our lead character, committed suicide mere weeks after the film wrapped. Uh, Actress Eloise Hart, who played the lead succubus, a male. Uh, Her daughter was kidnapped and murdered shortly thereafter. Director Leslie Stevens and his wife, actress Allison Ames, who played Kia, they divorced, and then Stevens' production company Daystar went bankrupt. So looks like Shatner was the only one who fared well after this. I mean, like right after it, everyone else's life literally fell apart, but he became a star. So I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe him and the Incubus had some kind of real life
He
pact.
made a deal with the Incubus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Um, it is refreshing because even though, like I said, Esperanto speaker. Now, how did your friend feel about the Esperanto? Because I keep reading that Esperanto speakers find this movie to be a joke.
She had no problem with that.
Okay.
She had
What?
no problem with it.
Yeah, because they are speaking. They learned it phonetically, and they learned what they were saying, but they had to learn it phonetically. and apparently they did not pronounce any of the words accurately because
Uh,
Stevens did not hire an on-set speech coach for them. I don't know
uh,
if he just neglected to or couldn't afford it. I'm not clear on. They didn't get into why. But as a result, they just kind of do it phonetically. So I guess it must be akin to watching. Well, for me, a movie that comes to mind immediately, maybe not to many people, is Takashi Miike's um, Suzuki Western Django, which is where all the Japanese actors spoke English phonetically.
hmm.
And it's kind of a fantasy Western with Asian people. Um, and their pronunciation is kind of crazy, but I mean, you can still kind of make it out. You lose the inflections of acting. Now, I did feel like the acting in this movie was pretty passionate. I felt that came across. Um, but I guess some people who are into the language didn't like it. Some people didn't like Shatner's accent. Since Shatner didn't know Esperanto, he did try to uh, he tried to use his only frame of reference that he could draw on, which was French. That's why I mentioned the French Canadian element earlier. So some
Hmm.
people feel like his Esperanto is French accented.
uh,
I I felt mildly, not super correctly, but I mean I don't know what correct Esperanto sounds like either. So, but just apparently
you
he's
know, I
hmm?
mean, it kind of hits me if something's supposed to be this universal language that we're all allegedly supposed to use in the future. There are just going to be various different accented versions of it. But, you know,
Right. You can't completely eliminate the Tower of Babel effect, I don't think.
yeah.
But I mean maybe they did on Riverworld, but so yes, I say Incubus, check it out. It's on YouTube. And it's on Daily Motion also if you follow that platform. And that's about it. So, um, we're going to wrap up for this episode and then we're going to come back with another installment here. So, wanted to remind you, I think Chuck says he had something to tell you guys that he was thinking about.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, if you like what we're doing here, and we sincerely hope you do, um, please hit like, subscribe, hit that little notification bell. That way, you know when our new videos pop up. And enjoy what we got. If you don't like it, by all means, engage with us, comment on it. Let's get a conversation going. But
Definitely.
enjoy and see you in the movies.
Peace out. Thank you.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.